Welcome back to Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. I'm super excited to be joined by Brian Weaver, the CEO of Torch.ai. And for those of you that aren't aware, AI is artificial intelligence. Brian has served as the CEO and has more than 20 years of experience leading mission-driven, high-growth, technology-focused companies. We're going to talk about all that he has done, all that he is continuing to do. We were just talking offline about some amazing, game-changing innovation. Super excited to have that conversation. Brian Weaver, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So I love to get to know the person behind the microphone. You are a serial entrepreneur, and I have to ask, Brian, how and why did you start your first company?
Oh man, I think I mowed lawns. I mean, I wanted to buy things. I love photography. I'm kind of a closet creative, and I wanted to buy a really, really expensive couple $1,000 camera. And I'm like, my parents didn't have a lot of money, and I had to go mow lawns. And so I took my family's lawnmower and I started mowing lawns all over the neighborhood. And then I got a buddy to join me and started my first company. That's born with the gene, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I have to say that your companies are currently serving nearly 1,300 clients. And I know you've been recognized as Small Business of the Year by the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. We were talking about Kansas City and what a great place it is. We'll perhaps save that for another conversation. So I have to ask again, Torch.ai, what do you do and why is it relevant to our audience?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the world of artificial intelligence is growing. It's complex. There's little pockets of applied artificial intelligence, which is really where we focus. There's a lot of academic stuff going on. But I basically had an idea back in 2012. I acquired a healthcare business from Wells Fargo, and I've always been a founder or an acquirer of companies, and I've done that, for the last 20 plus years. But I acquired this, really, really exciting healthcare information business, and decided that I wanted to get into analytics, and that led through a really fun story. The show is not nearly long enough to get into all the interesting journey that was. But we ended up figuring out how to process data differently, where we used AI and machine learning in particular to process data before it came to rest. So the idea of doing in-flight enrichment transformations of data, but using machines. And again, when you start talking about really large-scale enterprise problems of information, basically information is just too hard to get to. Data is too hard to use. And we figured out that we could apply machine learning to detect and understand what the data was faster and cheaper than anybody else on the planet. And it's just kind of blown up from there. And so our focus on AI is making the information, basically data, easier to use.
That's incredible. And when we talk about AI and machine learning, frequently, people's minds go to large organizations, and I know that you have supported clients like H&R Block with fraud detection and mitigation, as well as the United States Department of Defense with machine learning-enabled background investigations, which is a huge deal to speed up that process, and perhaps we'll spend a minute on that in just a moment. But for a small business audience, what is that big takeaway that you think entrepreneurs tuning in should perhaps pay attention to this growing phenomenon that is increasingly becoming a part of our vocabulary?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you boil it all down to its sort of basic principles, it's all about smart automation. So the world's moving so fast today. There's 2.5 IoT devices or digitally connected devices per human on the planet today. So there's just this massive amount of information floating around. And the businesses that are able to harness that gain a massive competitive advantage. And so whether that's trying to find operational efficiency, serving customers better than they did yesterday by using that information or making that information easier to use, that's a key thing. Or again, even developing net new innovations using information. The key here, and I think the big takeaway is the world has an opportunity to move at the speed of information, not at the speed of a business system, not at the speed of a data warehouse, and certainly not at the speed of a human. And so where we focus and sort of the discovery that we made was that because we could put machines and machine learning models in particular into a framework, we could actually improve the value received. We could make the data easier to use, make it fully available, and make it more valuable because we're able to move. Again, I would say at the speed of information. I think that's the big thing to think about as an entrepreneur when you look around in the industry that you're in. Really, everybody in the world, whether it's a highly competitive industry or it's true greenfield, you're really looking for that competitive advantage. And sometimes the availability of information and making information or workflows easier and simpler, and that simplification creates a massive competitive advantage. So that's what we've really, from a technical perspective, focused on.
Mm-hmm.
As an entrepreneur, I've focused on a whole different set of interesting growth criteria for myself, right? As I've learned over the last 2 decades, how to be a better manager and how to be a better leader. But I think from a technical perspective, there's a massive opportunity for companies to capitalize on automation opportunities across, lots and lots of industries and lots of operational capabilities.
Definitely. Again, I'm chatting with Brian Weaver, the CEO of Torch.ai. And Brian is, if I were to describe you as one thing, would be a serial entrepreneur. And certainly your advice in terms of AI and machine learning is very relevant to all of our audience. And certainly my takeaway from everything you've just shared is it is something that we need to pay very close attention to. But as I think about your entrepreneurship background, which you were just touching on, and I want to stick on that theme, is I see a lot of resilience in everything that you do. You've launched and acquired many companies, and again, have made quite an impact growing your client base. So as we said, working with large organizations like the DoD, which is great, but you also have a fun side to you too. I guess we could call it fun, and that's Ironman competition. Some might call it cruel and cruel punishment, but I know you've raced numerous Ironman competitions at many elite and amateur levels in the US and Europe. So why do you do that, and how does that connect to your entrepreneurship journey?
Oh man, I think when you're a guy like me, you've got this bottomless bucket of energy, and sometimes if you have a little bit of wisdom and maturity, you realize that a business that you're involved in may not be able to handle the full frontal assault of all of that energy. So you need a hobby outside the business. But honestly, I think as a metaphor for business, Ironman in particular, it's a very complex sport, right? It's a long day. You've got not only 3 disciplines, but then you also have the technical stuff with equipment, transitions, and all that, nutrition and fueling. And it ends up being a very, very complicated endurance sport. And so for a guy like me, I'm a data-driven person, and I love numbers and nerd stuff. And I also think that the complexity and the problem solving under duress, is a big thing. Like I've had a bicycle break on me in the middle of a race, and what do you do there? You got to solve that problem. I run out of gas. I've cramped massively. I've gotten sick. I've bled. And these are all these problems that you have to solve in real time, and you have to do it in a compressed manner. And this is why racing, and a lot of people love auto racing for the same reason. Mm-hmm. It's a great metaphor for business, because you got to build a team. Even if it's in a solo sport, you still have trainers and coaches and nutritionists and mechanics and all this other stuff around you. You've got to get that whole system to function at its optimal state. And then you've got to really know yourself. And you're going to have weaknesses as a human. And if you want to do well, you've got to overcome those weaknesses and turn them into strengths if you can. For me, problem solving is a big one. So, I was able to kind of ratchet down and remove as many variables as possible, and then used my skill at problem solving, on the day of, to be prepared. And so, from that perspective, it was a really great. I learned a lot of lessons, and I actually was able to transport a lot of those lessons back into the business. I've grown and made the most money actually after learning a lot of these lessons in Ironman.
That's incredible, and I'll admit that I've stalked you, and I've seen some of the things that you've posted on your LinkedIn, and of course you've got an incredible website, which we're going to send our listeners to in just a moment. And again, connecting the dots between these lessons of motivation, resilience, dealing with adversity, but also I know you have a lot to share on the topic of entrepreneurship and artificial intelligence, and where we're going in the world of technology. So certainly I want to make sure all of our listeners have the opportunity to get in touch. Brian Weaver, can you share some contact information?
Yeah, I'm available on LinkedIn, and I really enjoy interacting with people there. And really, if I can help give advice or share some war stories, I'd be happy to. You're not alone. It's a tough journey, but it can be really fun and rewarding if you do it right.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your expertise. I look forward to touching base with you again real soon to continue this conversation. You're listening to the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. Don't touch that dial because we've got more from Get Down to Business coming back in just a moment. Get on my website, shalomklein.com. I'm at a quick break, headlines, commercials. We'll be right back on the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship.